Pine time.
Ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, welcome to the Namco Museum Tour. It's your boy Dre, and I'll be your tour guide, and along with me today is the one, the only, frequent guest, curmudgeon in crime, friend of the show, it's Vin.
I've evolved from being the pal of the Pac-Man pal to being the fairy in Pac-Land. The fairy over his shoulder, as it were.
Will you cosplay the fairy from Pac-Land at your next con?
Oh yeah,
like go to
absolutely.
AX this summer and just be the fairy.
Yeah, I think a grand total of one person will recognize me if I'm lucky.
Well, see, here's the thing. How would I know it's a fairy from Pac-Land? I would just think you're a fucking fairy from like any, you know what I mean, from any shit.
It's a pretty generic design.
Yeah, it's just a fairy.
No, Tinkerbell's green. The Great Fairy's like purple or something.
a great fairy. Oh, you're gonna be that sexy, baby.
Oh yeah, look forward to it.
So we're here. We want to talk Namco Museum, but not just any Namco museums. We want to talk about the PlayStation era in particular. Everyone knows what Namco Museum is, right? Everyone's seen these. They've been on a million different systems since the mid 90s. But just in case you don't know, a Namco Museum is a classic game compilation featuring games from Namco's vast library of arcade games. So they just put 4 or 5 or 6 of them back in the day in the PlayStation era and more as things went along onto a disc, or in this case now a digital package. And that's how they sell them to you. I don't know if it was like it clearly was not like the first arcade game compilation, but it sure as hell popularized it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's the first that was really widely released, I think. I don't know if there was one that preceded it, but yeah, like this was the sort of first compilation that sticks out to me. It was all over magazines at the time. Like you really saw, and you saw them on shelves, and just the branding really was quite poignant.
Yeah, the branding was striking. We'll get to that in a sec. But yeah, as I said, the series started as an anthology on the original PlayStation with 5 volumes of Namco Museum being released over the course of, I would say, 16 months or so. I have all the dates right here. So the first volume was released in July 96. Volume 2 was October 96. Volume 3 was February 97. Volume 4 was July 97. Volume 5 was November 97. So basically, before 98 was out, all 5 of them were out here.
And don't you think that's like a pretty like dense cadence? Like it's actually hard to imagine that kind of retail release schedule nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, it feels kind of like, I don't want to say flooding the market, but definitely like it was happening, man. They weren't wasting any time. They must have been working on these since the PlayStation was like a thing to be able to like crank these out.
Oh, there's definitely some pre-planning. Oh, absolutely.
So which ones did you have back in the day? Because I had Volume 1. I was waiting for it. I was like, oh, I can't. I really was anticipating it. When I first saw the concept of these, they're going to release 5 of these. Oh my God, I couldn't wait. I get to just play Pac-Man and Galaga and shit all I want at home. Fucking awesome. I had the first one, and then I got the 5th one like later. I saw it used at a shop or something. I was like, holy shit, these games are great. But yeah, those are the ones I had, Volume 1 and Volume 5. Which ones did you have?
To be entirely honest with you, I actually didn't own them on PS1. I saw them all over magazines. So like I almost had a feeling of like what was like in these compilations. But for whatever reason, I actually ended up never picking them up until like the Vita actually. So I owned them all 5 digitally. But back in the day, yeah, I never actually owned them, embarrassingly enough.
Did you ever? That's so wild. So did you ever play them? Did you know that like, oh, you could walk around a museum and look at shit, or like, did you have any idea?
Yeah, I think I saw the hallways and screenshots at those magazines, but just in terms of like the sheer depth of like optional like content, I don't think I really knew at the time.
That's fucking crazy, man. That's pretty wild. Okay, well, it's just because I don't know. I remember you told me you had like the Rainbow Islands Bubble Bobble thing, and you had like other such compilations, right? So I kind of figured like this would definitely be something you had. So I'm kind of surprised to hear that.
I'm kind of, yeah, it's a little weird. It feels like something to be right up my alley, but yeah, for whatever reason, maybe I just let it slip. I don't know.
But yeah, so the thing is, after these 5 volumes of Namco Museum on PlayStation, these compilations started to lose something special. It wasn't the quality of the games, and it wasn't the emulation slipping or anything like that. It was the museum itself. Namco Museum wasn't just called that because it was a collection of historic games. On PlayStation, Namco used to feature a literal museum. You got to walk around in an actual fancy schmancy 3D graphics museum, right? In first person, presumably controlling Pac-Man as the icon on the lower right would indicate. I mean, I guess you are Pac-Man, right?
You gotta really be, because the icons is context sensitive. If you get close to something as you walk down these hallways, Pac-Man will actually like play a sound, and then his animation will change or whatever, right?
Oh, I guess he like walks as you like move forward or like whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Along.
Yeah. And but yeah, you walk down hallways, you get to see all sorts of promotional materials, and there's all sorts of sprites that you can interact with. Some of them will lead to how to play guides and stuff like that. And as you traverse these hallways, at the end of them, you'll actually see like the themed room with the actual arcade cabinet inside that you can open and start your game, which is actually really crazy, because a lot of stuff nowadays is very menu driven, right? Even like all the Namco Museum games since then have basically just, well, you just pick from a menu, whether it's like Pac-Man Museum Plus or whether it's Namco Museum Switch or like whatever, right?
Right, it's just a menu. Well, I mean, Namco Museum Switch has like an attractive menu, right? It has like a system and ranking system that's pretty unique or whatever. But like, yeah, it's not a museum anymore. That's for fucking sure. Mm-mm. You know, because now, like you said, if you have promotional materials in your game that you can look at, think about like Street Fighter 30th Anniversary or something like that, and all the promo material in there. And you can like look at like all sorts of docs and stuff, but it's not a museum. You don't control a avatar in first person to walk up to articles in a museum and look at them anymore. You know, you're just picking from a menu, which is, I guess that's fine. But like, I miss the museum. The museum was like a lot of fun to me. So I was kind of sad when that went away in later iterations.
And part of the fun is that each of these rooms were like really closely tied to the game in question, right? So like, for instance, newly created music for each of these rooms, often arrangements of some of the songs in the respective game. So like, if you go into like the pole position room, you'll actually hear a CD quality arrangement of like the pole position song, which is really, really interesting and unique, right?
Well, yeah, that's leveraging that, like, you know, that CD quality music. I mean, you can't just have, I don't think it would have been a thing so much and so popular if it was just like, here's Pac-Man on a disc. I mean, I guess it could have, but the museum made it special, you know? And that's what we want to talk about today, the museums in Namco Museum. Of course, we'll be talking about the games too, of course, but we want to make sure to take the entire package into account and not just evaluate the games, because that's a different kind of show, of which we will probably do again in the future. But for this, we really want to factor in the forgotten element, the actual museum. And then at the end, we can rank them or something, or, you know, something that's good for content, right? Content, baby. Content trademark symbol.
Yes, pass some judgment on each of these 5 volumes and which stacks up. I mean, they all stack up in their own right? But some are kind of more interesting and wackier than others, I guess you could say.
Yeah, for sure. Each of the 5 volumes, the box art had this unified concept. Like, so it's like a white background with a letter of Namco for each of the volumes. So like, so volume 1 had N, volume 2 had A, volume 3 has M, volume 4 had C, and volume 5 had O to spell Namco. So if you had all 5, you could sort of, I don't know, display them or something. Here's like the Namco discs, right? Which is kind of a wild idea. I mean, it's weird. In an age where like box art was gaudy as hell, like it's kind of, this was like extremely classy. I feel like
it was. Wait, so if you had volume 1 and 2, you had no then.
Volume 1 and
if
5.
You had volume 1 and 5, yeah.
Yeah, if I had, I had no. I had New Order. I think one of their albums says that. I think one of their mid 2000s albums, it just says no, but the lowercase o, like spelling the word no, but it's supposed to be like New Order, like N-O.
Oh my god, that's so avant-garde. It's him.
Yeah.
You know, another thing about this box art I really like, though, is that the games on each respective volume are shown in the middle, right? So they actually like bothered to place these game lists like to fit like the gaps in the text, right? So for like the C, the games will like fit in like that little cranny in the middle there. Now for like some of them, the games just overlap the middle, which is just fine. But they actually thought about this, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, they really did put some planning into it, and I do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I really like the unified art concept. It almost reminds me of, like, you know, back in the day when a band would have, like, you know, they'd have their album art, and then all the subsequent singles would follow that album art motif. So it'd be kind of a unified concept for the album cycle, if you will. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe the Namco thing reminds me of that. Well, I mean, it was the mid 90s when we still did art like that for music. But yeah, that's kind of what I think of when I see that. For our more intrepid listeners already familiar with this kind of material, you may notice that we have not mentioned Namco Museum Encore. This extra compilation was only released in Japan. It was a release after the other 5 volumes in October 97. And it had 7 games on there not found in the previous, like, 5 Namco Museum volumes. But the problem with it is that it doesn't actually have a museum. It was just a menu of games like we talked about. So even back then, they were already forgetting about the museum in Namco Museum. So
That's wild. It's so fast, too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't come here, as I said. So we won't be talking about Namco Museum Encore today, but I thought I'd mention it just for completionist's sake. So we'll get started in just a second, but I found something interesting I want to mention first regarding the nature of the games on the disc. And this is straight from Wikipedia. The means by which Namco recreated the games for the PlayStation hardware is unclear. The arcade game conversions contain pieces of the original game data, but none of the original source code, suggesting that they are object-level recreations.
And that's so crazy to me because honestly, like, reprogramming something is never easy. Like, you can imagine how much work it would take to make sure something is accurate. But yeah, even as like we revisited these, there were very apparent signs that they were built from scratch. Like, for instance, you can pause them, which you can't really do for arcade games, right? And
it comes up with a pause. It has like it says pause on the screen, like when you pause Pac-Man. It says it. It's like, that's obviously not something you can do at the arcade. So
yeah, sometimes some games actually have little like color changes, so it looks like a faux sort of like midway track screen or something like that. I'm like, I don't know why it's glowing rainbow, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's
funny.
It's kind of weird. Yeah, more evidence to support that though is that some games like Ordyne and Dragon Spirit and The Legend of Valkyrie have loading, like in-game loading. Like during gameplay. And that's obviously not happening at the arcade. So, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like other similar late 80s ports or early 90s ports to PlayStation or Saturn, like Parodius or whatever, which would obviously have loading in between levels because they're not just emulating the arcade game, they're porting it. That must have been what Namco was doing with like Ordyne and Dragon Spirit, right? It has to be the
absolutely.
same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense given that, like, you know, these games have levels, right? So it's a natural loading point, but at the same time, like, the fact that they managed to actually like build it from scratch, like, I can't even imagine how much work that would take, and given the cadence of these releases, that's actually like pretty impressive, honestly.
It's really cool, and it shows that, like, one thing we kind of forget about, maybe sometimes, or at least I do, is that when these compilations came out, these games weren't that old. They're really old now. But, like, okay, when Namco Museum Volume 1 came out, Pac-Man is 16 years old. Now, that's old, right? But that's not, like, ancient like it is now. Now it's over 40 years old.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like it's weird to think about, like, you know, Ordyne came out, I think, in like 88 or Dragon Spear's 87. If you're playing a disc from like 96 or 97, that's like 10 years ago. That's not really that long.
Yeah, I was about to crack a joke that I think on stream I celebrated Dig Dug being like 42 years old or something like that. It's like, oh my god.
That's weirdly precise, I guess. But okay, I think we've said enough. You ready to visit the Namco museums? Ready to go?
I am.
Pack all your shit. You got all your, but I almost said binoculars. You don't bring binoculars to a museum. What do you bring to a museum? Monocle? You bring your monocle?
Do people bring monocles? I see sound guides a lot.
Sound guides?
Yeah, like audio guides. Like you press the number and it plays the accompanying text. That's us.
something you bring to the thing. No, not like that. God, have you ever been to a museum before?
No, I've never been to a museum. I've been to a Namco museum before. Does that count?
Yes. All right. Okay, let's visit Namco Museum Volume 1 now. All right, we're here. Looking pretty good. Looking pretty fancy in here.
It's nicely lit.
It's a museum. I sure as fuck hope so. I mean, imagine seeing that on Yelp. Man, this museum was so dimly lit, I couldn't see a thing. Like,
I want a refund. I couldn't see anything because it's too dark.
All right. Let's hit the bell at the front desk and see what games we have in this Namco Museum Volume 1. We have in Namco Museum Volume 1 from 1980, Pac-Man. Also from 1980, Rally X. New Rally X came out the next year in 1981, along with Galaga and Bosconian, also in 1981. 1982 saw Pole Position, and 1986 Toy Pop, all in Namco Museum Volume 1. A note about Toy Pop, though. This never came to North American arcades. No one distributed it here, including Namco themselves. So Namco Museum Volume 1 marks the first release of Toy Pop here. I actually didn't know that.
That's actually really crazy to think about, that it, didn't come here originally, and we don't actually necessarily know why, but and it's sort of the odd one here too, amongst the whole bunch.
Yeah, I mean, you could think about it that way, like, why didn't Fozon get picked up? I understand why like Libble Rabble or something didn't get picked up, but why didn't Galaga get picked up? I don't know. I guess it was just kind of weird back then. You never know. Yeah. So one other presentation aspect of the Namco museums on PS1 that we didn't get into yet, that's very important, is that each one had a unique CGI intro where Pac-Man is just running around doing God knows what while they like shoehorn all the characters from the games that are in that respective volume. They are insane. They are absolutely insane in that like cheesy 90s CG intro PlayStation era kind of way. It's whatever you're thinking it is, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, there may be some plasticity and maybe some low poly shenanigans going on. I think that's pretty accurate to say.
I mean, sure, but like Namco was like the king of CGI back then with like Tekken and like all their CG intros were like the best, right? So, and these are really high quality too for what they are at the same time. It's like kind of,
It's cool having them though, but yeah, I guess it might be a good idea to describe what's happening in each one, and
we will do that. Let's do that. For each one of these, we're going to describe each one because it's so stupid when you say what happens out loud. It's dumb enough watching it. When you say it, it just becomes that much more ridiculous. So at the beginning of each of these, we're going to say what happens in the CG intro, and I'll do the first one. This is what happens in the intro for Namco Museum Volume 1.
Oh God.
Pac-Man is running down the dirt road in the middle of the grassy landscape as the camera swings into frame to the giant 3D Namco logo. But we quickly find out why Pac-Man is running, because Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde, of course, are chasing him. Pac-Man looks towards the sky as he's running, and he sees a Bosconian starbase and a double ship from Galaga flying overhead. And then all of a sudden, 2 cars are roaring up behind him, and it's the Rally X and pole position cars for some reason. They whoosh past Pac-Man, and then he falls down, and he's so confused and disoriented. Oh no, what am I doing? But hey, have no fear, Miss Pac-Man is here, and she offers a hand to Pac-Man. He gets back up on his feet, and they both walk to the Namco Museum in the distance together.
What in the world, man? What are they doing here?
I
what
told
is
you,
anything doing here?
They're just shoehorning. Oh, Bosconian. Okay, yeah, sure. The double Galaga ship. Whoosh. Okay, I guess. Whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to make sense. Just do it.
Right from space, no less. Yes. Doesn't have to make any sense.
Nope. Sure doesn't. Each Namco museum has a unique loading animation. And the first one is this running Pac-Man. I guess it's supposed to be from like Pac-Land. It's not that sprite. It's a unique sprite. Actually, that's kind of interesting that it's a unique sprite, right? At least I don't recognize it.
Yeah, well, again, that kind of speaks to like how much effort they put into these compilations. Like, there's actually a lot of unique assets and stuff. And one thing that's actually kind of funny is that you can actually mash the D-pad, and then Pac-Man will start bouncing left and right a lot faster.
I think you can mash anything because I used to mash the buttons.
Did you? Okay, yeah.
I actually didn't know you can mash the D-pad.
Yeah, it's pretty silly because he goes quick.
Yeah, he starts going real fast. So let's talk about the museum. So the layout here in this volume 1 is like, it's a single octagonal room after you get past the initial lobby, of course, where you talk to the receptionist and register your name for records. We'll talk about that in a sec. But the main room is just like the single octagonal room with a marble floor and marble pillars and stuff. So it really looks like a museum. And it has these 8 doors leading to various long hallways with articles that you could look at. And then that leads to a game room. And there's also a lounge where you could look at some other stuff. It's a very simple octopus design, but I guess it works.
Yeah, it works. And each of the hallways are really just giant L shapes, right? So, I mean, that's all you need. Like, as you kind of traverse these hallways, it just has stuff on the sides that you can interact with. But, I mean, the layouts are fine. But they're just pretty basic, that's all.
Simple and effective, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot going on in this first museum, but that's fine. I mean, it was the first time you ever did this concept, and it's very easy to find stuff. So it's like, oh, you're in the octagon room. Oh, I want to go play Galaga. You go in that door, and then you see all the articles of Galaga right along. It's very simple, but it's not confusingly laid out at all. You know exactly where to go to get to stuff. It's not like you're going to have to bumble around like, oh man, where's that Pac-Man machine again or something, like a real museum, you know?
That's a good point. Yeah. Because you always know what to expect. I think that's what it sets up for you.
Right. Okay. The music, man, that new age ass hallway music that plays.
It's so soothing. Oh, it's so chill.
It's something. It's 1996 in a nutshell. Hey, kids, you want to know what the 90s sounded like? It sounded like this. I almost don't even know what to say. Like, okay, we're making fun right now. I think between us, we love this kind of music just because we're children of the 90s, and we like this kind of, especially like CD-ROM era bullshit. But I think most people listening now would be like, this is weird. I promise at the time it made sense.
Yeah, it's a product of its time. I mean, for better or worse.
So anyway, yeah, once you walk down the right hallway, you get to the game room that you want to get to, and like you said, each one has a unique game room, and that's probably the coolest thing about any Namco museum. So why don't you talk about one that you like?
The Rally X room has a lot of charm, so it leans into the whole racing motif. And what I really particularly enjoy is that there's an upright cabinet with Rally X on one side, but then the opposite side of the room has a cocktail cabinet for new Rally X, the upgraded version. So the fact that there's actually like it's sort of consolidated so that you don't have like to travel too far to play one version or the other, and I think that's pretty cool. And furthermore, everything just pops. Even like the exit sign has like the same font as like the Rally X logo. There's checkered flags everywhere. And speaking of music, there's an arranged version of the new Rally X tune, which is super swank. It's got like sort of jazzy instrumentation.
The 90s, baby.
Yeah. I mean, dude, it's a fantastic space.
Yeah, that's something I wasn't prepared for when I went back to this, is how 90s, like now I know, of course, it came out in 96. I had it in 96, but like you don't really think about that kind of stuff because you're in the moment. Now, like 25 years removed from it or more, holy shit, man. This was 90s as hell. Like that.
It's really hard to have that sort of context when you're like playing it though, because like why in the world would we have ever questioned that? But
yeah,
it's the music though.
Well, no, not at the time, that's for sure. Also, as like a deep cut, you were talking about exit signs. Exit signs to go back to the octagonal main room have the Metrocross runner on it, like jumping, and it says exit, which like who would know that? Like I didn't know that at the time. But I do now because I know what Metrocross is, but it's such a deep cut, man. Nobody loves themselves like Namco. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and like the references they crack, of course, are endless. They just love like cracking deep cut names in each of their games. We could go off all day if we wanted to, but it's a rabbit hole to try to do that.
If you played a given Ridge Racer and you know why most of the cars are named what they are, you're a sicko like us. That's for sure. So I want to talk about the Toy Pop room because it really is something. Like, first of all, why is it just a large white space with like Toy Pop spelled on the floor, like in front of this really classy font too, right in front of the arcade machine? Is this some sort of like surreal Toy Pop purgatory? Like, I mean, the probably. Arrangement that plays there is incredible of the Toy Pop theme. I mean, that just makes it feel more surreal, though. Like that's what I call a Red Book classic. That Toy Pop shit in there. Oh my god.
You're really using that CD for the arranges of the 90s, no less.
That's for sure.
The question I have though is like, is this white space like art direction or is it happenstance? Like they could have added some presents or toys or something. It didn't have to be white.
No, they could have just had at least like the two characters, like sort of, like either just two puppets just sitting there. I don't know. They could have done something. Maybe they just ran out of time. I don't know. Like it's like, this is just going to be a white room and that's it. I don't know, man.
But it's so weird because the other rooms are so like full of character. And I mean, in a manner of speaking, I guess a white space is character, but does it really?
I mean, okay. It has a look though. It doesn't just look like the white void from I can't even think of an example. I don't think it looks like unfinished. I'll put it that way. I think someone planned to do this. I don't know if they did everything that they could have done, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just weird.
But Yeah, I mean, the game rooms in Volume 1 are pretty fucking quaint compared to like later entries. I mean, the only one with any significant props is the Pac-Man room, which has like the classic, pack house and the yard and the dog house or whatever. The Galaga room is like nice looking. It's like the cockpit of, I guess, the ship or something. The Bosconian room is kind of trippy, right? It has that like rotation space background with a 3D version of the Bosconian base there in the background. But all of these are pretty simple but effective, I think is what you could say for this first volume. Later on, they get a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I would say in general speaking, it's mostly a cabinet in the center with some fancy walls. I mean, which is obviously not a disc, but it's just, fairly straightforward, right? And one thing that was really trippy to us is that we were trying to figure out the Bosconian song, which is a game that is normally silent. So it's like, what in the world could they have based this song off of? But I mean, it's thematically on point, but we had no clue where the Bosconian song actually came from.
I don't know either. I have no clue.
Yeah, we tried to look into it, but we don't know.
Who knows? I think some of the rooms do have original music, so I mean, I guess this is just one of them because there is an opening jingle to Bosconian, but it doesn't sound like that.
No, it does. But
it just sounds like an original song where they just put the voice clips from the game like inserted into it randomly.
It's the song inspired by the video game, the official arrange of the game.
Like one of those like early 90s like super arrangements of like music of like video game music that was like a thing back then. Have you ever heard like the Gradius ones from like 91 92? Those are fucking crazy.
They're pretty crazy.
Those are wild. Yeah, they're like some like
too.
Fusion jazz rock shit of like Gradius music. It's crazy. Maybe Bosconian came from one of those. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe similar mindset. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to talk about some cool stuff we saw in the actual museum, just articles or whatever, just stuff around and not just the game rooms. So the How to Play plaque in any given hallway features Professor Pac-Man, which is fun enough. But the one for Pac-Man states the following. Pac-Man was released in 1980, and it quickly became a worldwide hit. It had unique episodes, intermissions, and game developers had varying opinions of it. In one of the exhibits, Pac-Man is referred to as Puck-Man, but that was a development title. First of all, it's not just one exhibit. Puck-Man is all over the place. And secondly, stop lying to us. Puck-Man wasn't a development title. It was legit called Puck-Man in Japan. Everyone knows that. Lying ass motherfuckers. Like we know better.
We've literally seen marquees that say Puck-Man, and I think some of the cabinet artists has said it too. So I mean, like, I don't think that's development stuff at all.
Well, they're just making shit up. So I don't know why they said that.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
That wasn't an early version of Pac-Man in Japan or something. That was Puck-Man. That was what it was called. Anyway,
it was literally what it was called. Yeah, I don't know. Beats me, man.
So in the lounge, you can look at magazine covers of a publication called NG, which was apparently a Namco magazine that ran from 1982 to 1993. As I found out. Really cool shit on these covers. Before I go on, did you know this existed? I mean, I'm sure I looked at this stuff in the lounge like when I originally had this game back in the day, but I sure as hell didn't remember it because it was like a surprise to me when I played it again.
I totally forgot about this, to be entirely honest with you. And like I generally keep my ear low with kind of obscure sort of things like this, but I don't even remember the magazine. I guess it would have been like kind of when I was like super young, so I probably wouldn't have been able to see it unless some rando on the internet talked about it on like a GeoCities website or something. But
oh god, the Angel Fire website for scanning NG magazine.
Oh my god, that's so niche. What does the G even stand for? I actually forgot what it stood for, if anything.
Namco Greatness. I honestly don't fucking
Greatness.
know.
Okay, let's go with that
one. But yeah, there was one of the issues of NG that caught my eye was issue 12, where the in-game description for the issue says this: Pac-Man is morphing into a tiger. Let's get out of here before he gets us.
Tiger Man.
Sure enough, there is a Pac-Man as a tiger on this cover.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it's super weird. It's not just like Pac-Man if he had like a tiger suit, if you can imagine a Pac-Man shaped tiger suit. He is literally a tiger. Imagine if Pac-Man and Tigger from Winnie the Pooh became one on the spiritual sexual level, and it became like Pac-Man Tigger or something. That's exactly what it looks like.
That's so weird.
It's so fucking bizarre. It's so weird. And of course the ghosts are like freaking out because like, oh god, Tiger Pac-Man's gonna get us. Or
I mean, to be fair though, wouldn't you freak out if Tiger Pac-Man were like on your tail? I think that's fair.
Oh, I'm out of there. I'm hella out of there.
It's like, yo, am I in a fever dream right now? Like, what's going on?
Nah, I'm gone.
But yeah, speaking of other cool stuff, though, I really enjoyed some of the merchandise. There's a sweatshirt promoting a new Rally X, and even says, like, not available, which I thought was kind of extra to say, because why would a new Rally X sweatshirt be available in the 90s? It's kind of weird.
But yeah, all of them say not available. All of the merchandise says no longer available. It's like, do they really think people are going to call up Namco? It's like, hey, I saw that Bosconian pop card. I really want to buy one. Oh, sorry. Like,
yeah, I've learned about the Pac-Man shirt in the game. I gotta get that sucker. But yeah, but it's interesting that they actually like seemingly took photos of this merchandise, because you can tell that it's sort of like pretty antiquated in terms of like how they documented these things. But it's cool, man. It's a nice artifact.
It's cool. It is cool to see that stuff, because there's a lot of stuff in this museum hall that I didn't know existed. I wouldn't have seen a lot of this stuff just bubbling around the internet. Right. Yeah, at least I don't think I would have. So
you want to know another thing I would never have known about? So there's in the lounge, you can see some historical Namco artifacts in Volume 1. And one of these artifacts is this. They call it an android, but it's like a humanoid android. It's like really freaky. It's like they show a person's face, but then they also show like the android's eyes are like really large, and I'm just like, what's going on? I have no idea what this is for. Like, what is this?
He's like opening his mouth, and the android is also kind of like with the same kind of expression. And it's like, okay, or is this to suggest that like I don't know what that means?
I just don't know what this is for. Is it like maybe it's like an amusement park thing or something? I don't know, but
I don't know. I really don't know. And like it's in black and white, which somehow makes it freakier.
Yeah, that's right.
It's weird. But here's the thing, because I saw you put this in the notes. So in my attempt to figure out more about these robots, I did some internet sleuthing, and I didn't find an answer to our question. We have no idea why the robot is there, the android. But I discovered something else entirely. So the robot receptionist lady that I mentioned earlier in the before you go into the museum where you register your name. That's actually a real robot that was a receptionist at the Namco offices.
That's so weird. That's so strange.
That thing actually exists before they merged with Bandai, of course. And her name was Uketsuke, which literally means receptionist. So
what?
That's how you say that's the word for receptionist in Japanese. So I was like, oh no. I know too much. One, I know too much about Namco. Two, I know too much Japanese to know this now.
But the fun part is that like this sort of deep cut reference really just shows all the love put it into Namco Museum, right? I mean, that's just a lot of heart, right?
For sure. Yeah, this is for as simple as a layout it is and whatever, there's a lot of cool stuff in this Volume 1 museum, I think.
Oh, it's jam-packed.
My opinion.
You know what else is jam-packed? The Namco the Bandai Namco basement with all the robots. That's also jam-packed.
That's a good question. Where are they? Where the hell are they?
I don't know, man.
They gotta still exist, right?
Yeah, I would assume so. Somewhere it's maybe a collector's basement. I don't know, but
that's a freaky ass basement. Like, imagine going to the basement and seeing that android down there. I'd be like, oh my god! It's like, I'm just gonna shut the door. I would shit myself, man. Fine time. let's talk about some of the games real quick. We don't have to touch on every single one, but just in general, as a collection, how do you feel about it? We can discuss some of the individual games if you want to. But personally, can I ask you a question? How do you fuck with this lineup?
You don't?
Pac-Man, Galaga, Pole Position, Untouchable, historical classics, right? And then you have the obscurities like Bosconian and Toy Pop, which are also great. Everything on here is a winner. It's amazing. And oh yeah, both Rally X's are here too. Like, what a lineup.
Yeah, but by the way, some of the greatest games, and arguably one of the most upgraded games, right? Yeah, in New Rally X. So
yeah. Let's talk about that now. New Rally X. Maybe one of the best games of all time? I think so. I think New Rally X is better than a lot of Namco classics we hold up today. And I'm not trying to dunk on anything. I'm just saying New Rally X deserves to be talked about with Dig Dug or, Galaga and shit. And we don't. And I understand why we don't to a degree, but New Rally X to me, the original's fine. It's still good. New Rally X though, Jesus.
Yeah, it's so crazy because ultimately, in a manner of speaking, it practically renders the original obsolete in a way, right? And not to say you can't get some funsies out of the original, but at the same time, it's it's so far above upgrade while keeping the general simplicity. And we often say that this is actually the first notable case of background music in a video game. And what a catchy tune it is, right? And Namco still uses this song even to this day. It still crops up here and there in rando games. But
it's a great BGM for sure.
It's such a nice burst of simplicity, yet at the same time, if you screw up, it's essentially your fault, right? So, it's just very well balanced. And
what I love about it? The balance, and I love any game that does this, the balance of looking at your radar versus looking at the game screen, because you can't run into a rock or something like that. So you're looking at the radar to see where stuff is or even enemies are, but you still have to pay attention to your surroundings in game or you're just going to crash. So glancing your eyes back and forth and learning to balance that stuff is very key and very fun. I don't think too many games have things like that.
No, yeah, you really have to react to things as they come, but the radar really does help direct where to go and stuff if you want to have a feeling of what direction to try to go, right? But yeah, it's a very interesting sort of back and forth experience, right? So that's really cool.
That's for sure. I can't get enough of that game. I love playing New Rally X to this day. I have it on Arcade Archives. I played it a lot on here, revisiting for this podcast. Mm-hmm. I will always play that game a lot. So Toy Pop is an interesting one because I remember back when Volume 1 came out and I didn't really get it. I would play it with a friend too, and it became significantly more fun. I guess it's one of those things that's more fun with two people, but I still didn't like Bubble Bobble almost, right? It just
sure.
I'm not saying you need to have another person to have fun, but it just made it more fun for me. But I still didn't totally understand what the main attraction was supposed to be. I don't know. It just didn't totally click. I didn't hate it by any means, but now today I'm older and I get it. I'm wiser. I understand. Toy Pop is much better than I ever gave it credit for when I was 14 or whatever.
Oh, that's great though that your opinion has kind of changed over time. But to me, it does really make a strange first impression. Notably, it's just the objective is not really necessarily the most clear right away. It's you're supposed to track down these things to open the door, but it's almost roundabout in a manner of speaking. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You're not getting a key, you're getting some hearts or something, and I'm wait, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But once you kind of figure out the general way things work, it grows on you. It really, really does. Though the one thing I have to wrap my brain around is that you can only really hold one power up at a time, and it mostly just works on one enemy. You get attack for a balloon. I think there's tires in there or something like that too. Just tires defeat the cars, but the tacks don't defeat the cars. You would think the tacks would because you're popping the tires of the car, but that's not how it works. You have to throw tires at the car. It actually doesn't make any sense, but
yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all. right?
Yeah.
And then you have like the basic bitch enemies that can be killed by anything.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's just like, I don't know. But yeah, I understand it a lot better now, especially the score play. You know, not that I really play for score play. I don't really want to be the toy pop master or anything. But yeah, it's a really good game. And I'm so glad it's here. I'm so glad, man. Do you know how many companies, just about any company that isn't Namco, would have been like, this never came out here. This isn't even going to be on the North American version because nobody's going to care. But no, they had the confidence in their products to be like, we're going to deliver this to an audience for the first time in compilation form. And they're going to like it. And they did.
In the 90s, they still weren't regularly releasing like Japanese exclusives over here. So like that was definitely like an era of trepidation so far as like companies were concerned. It's like, no, that game is too like obscure or weird for American audiences. They were still making that sort of decision. And but yeah, when you put it that way, I think it was great. Yeah, it's bolder than I gave them credit for. One more thing really quick though is that the game hints are actually really funny. One of them says, defeat magician. You can get a 5,000 points by defeating him. Collect the 7 or star when it appears on the screen. Only star bullets and the whirlwind defeat magician. I'm like, what? I sounded crazy reading it. I don't know how you even sounded, though.
I'm sorry. You can get a 5,000 points?
Yeah, a 5,000 points.
That's great. One thing I discovered, not while researching for this podcast, but just something a few years ago, I found out that the voice clips in Bosconian were done by the programmer, one of the programmers.
Oh, really?
So it's just a guy in Japan just doing the English clips the best he can.
I could never have noticed.
Yeah, that's why they sound the way they do.
You know, that's cool, though. That reminds me of how, like, all the old voices, I guess in, like, Street Fighter 2 World Warrior, I think it's, like, various people in the staff, but you can't really tell because of the audio fidelity, I think.
Well, no, it didn't really matter too much back then, and you couldn't really tell here on Bosconian, maybe when he says condition red.
Condition red. Condition red.
Or like alert comes out really weird.
A lot.
A lot. Yeah, it comes out kind of strange.
A lot.
For the most part, it's fine. You know what my favorite is? Spy ship sighted.
Spy ship sighted.
Spy ship sighted. It sounds so weird.
I mean, it's poignant, I guess, which is all you need, I suppose.
Okay, so I noticed something though. When you load pole position in Namco Museum, it goes through its arcade boot sequence like usual, and then it briefly flashes one of the trackside billboards before the title screen. That billboard says Tower of Galaga on it. But that doesn't make any sense because pole position came out 2 years before Tower of Galaga. So that's not possible.
It's a time paradox, yeah.
Right. So it had to have been edited in later. So I did some research and I discovered that the original arcade version of pole position had Pepsi billboards, Marlboro billboards, and Canon, like the camera company Canon.
What?
Yeah, those were all in the game. And obviously they removed them for Namco Museum Volume 1. But yeah, the pole position had real deal sponsorships.
I mean, I guess that's cool. I'm just trying to contemplate the logistics of putting Marlboro. Like, wouldn't that affect like your age rating? I don't know. It's like kind of interesting.
That didn't exist in 1982, man. No one gave a fuck. Like,
no, just saying if you were to put it in, if you attempted to get that Marlboro hookup or whatever for whatever reason.
Oh, they wouldn't. I think by the 90s we didn't really have cigarette advertising like that anymore, anyway.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, sure. It's a context thing. Yeah.
So in the 80s that was still a thing, but yeah.
Man, that's wild. I had no idea. That's crazy.
But yeah, anything else about this lineup, this great lineup in Namco Museum Volume 1?
There's nothing particularly weird. I think it's just good to have the hits and then, you know, kind of balance it out with some lesser known games as well. Yeah, just the inclusion of Toy Pop again is really, really great. I really think it's fantastic that they made that decision to include it, even though like we never got it.
Yeah, I'd say that that's the great thing about curated compilations like this, is that you're willing to try them all. You know, if you have a TurboGrafx 16 Mini, you're going to try all the things on there. It's like, oh, what's this game? What's that game? If you have a list of 700 TurboGrafx ROMs, you're just going to be like, I don't know. I guess I'll play Bonk again. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, but the fact that you have this disc of 7 things, and it's like, I'm going to explore all this stuff, makes you try something like Toy Pop where you wouldn't really before.
The curation aspect is so prevalent and it's so important in these compilations, and that's what gives it character. Because, like, yeah, I probably never would have, like, you know, clicked on this in a giant list of games or whatever. There's just no way. Like, well, I would have seen the name and be like, I don't know what that is.
Before we move on to Namco Museum Volume 2, a couple questions first, or just a couple topics, rather. So, Namco Museum Volume 1 sold 1.6 million copies in North America alone. I couldn't find the worldwide numbers, but 1.6 million here. Think about that. What of 1.6 million copies sold of an early 80s arcade game compilation. That's insane.
So many units.
That's so many units. Can you imagine that number today for anything? What if I were to tell you, like, Atari 50 sold 1.6 million copies? Wouldn't that feel insane?
Digital Eclipse be like the richest company on the face of the planet. That's so many units.
Yeah, that's so much. And they sold this many. I just, it was a big deal, man. I guess I wasn't the only one anticipating this shit, huh? People really wanted something like this. It was time.
Right. You know, the crazy thought is sort of like a parallel to that. Like, I can't even imagine any sort of like throwback or retro-y sort of compilation even selling anything close. Like, I don't even know, like, what could he even do? Like, I can't even imagine anything that would have that pull nowadays. Like, there's no way.
I don't know. What would it be outside of... I don't even think if Nintendo, I mean, I understand a lot of them are on arcade archives now, but that doesn't matter. Let's say they put out a Switch compilation of the Donkey Kong trilogy, arcade trilogy, and like Radar Scope and the two Punch Out and Super Punch Out and all the versus Balloon Fight versus Urban Champion, whatever, Clue Land. I really don't think that would do it.
I got it though. If you put Popeye on it, that's going to bring all the guys to the yard.
It would bring me to the yard. I'm there for Popeye. Absolutely.
I'm just trying to imagine these games on this crusty physical card or something. It's like, I got a new card to go play Popeye, and I guess I could do Arcade Punch on top of that too. But it's like, that's not approaching 1 million. It's not even approaching like 100,000 probably. I mean, maybe it could, but
oh, I think it'll sell that much, maybe, if it's lucky. 1.6 million copies. It's fucking crazy,
so
man.
It's so much.
So one more thought before we move on. There was something that struck me as I was playing this original Namco Museum. And it's this. Is Namco Museum the platonic ideal of what we thought the interactive CD-ROM multimedia market would be? Do you remember what I'm talking about? Because we had this idea in the early 90s that CD programs on the computer wouldn't necessarily always be games, but like this window into themed content.
Yeah, that's familiar.
People laugh at like CDI stuff now, like the Flowers of Robert Mapplethorpe or like other types of like that museum content. But honestly, that was a burgeoning market back then. There was a reason why those games were made. It wasn't just like bullshit.
Yeah,
I mean, it turned out to be bullshit because the CDI was bullshit. But you know what I mean? Like there was there was logic behind putting out stuff like that is now like completely gone, or was almost completely gone by the mid 90s. We decided the way we were going to use the CD-ROM, and it wasn't like that. But even music CDs sometimes, I don't know if you remember this, if you put it into your computer, it would launch like an EXE. And it would have like, here's some band photos. Yeah. And here's a music video in QuickTime 2 or something.
Yeah, I didn't really have too many that did that, but yeah, I remember the pop-up. It would automatically open up and take over the machine with the band window with the giant buttons, right? Or whatever.
Yeah. It was like, click here to go to our website on the World Wide Web or whatever. Like stuff like that.
The World Wide Web.
Anyway, Namco Museum feels not too far away from those ideas. Am I crazy, or I don't know?
I think you're onto something. I actually agree with like that line of thought, particularly because a lot of what they included is sort of it's really supplemental in a lot of ways, right? Especially like the aforementioned scanned images and photos. And I think the presentation and I guess some of the fidelity is actually not that dissimilar from say Encarta or like Compton's Encyclopedia or something like that.
You son of a bitch! You always have to every time with the Encarta when we're talking about crusty shit.
I thought Compton's is more of a timestamp, but
I think Encarta, saying the word Encarta makes me taste Fruitopia. Like it is so 90s.
Did you ever own a volume of it? Because I had it on my Mac.
I think we had like Encarta 97 or something that came with the computer that we got.
Yeah, that's right.
I think.
That's great.
I feel like that was my memory I unearthed when we were talking about Echo, the Tides of Time, last year on.
The Tides of Time.
Yeah, the Tides of Time.
You should find it and put it into your computer.
I will never do that. The CD-ROM drive I definitely have in 2024. All right. I think we said all we can about Volume 1. Ready to move on to Namco Museum Volume 2?
I am. I'm floating as we speak.
You're going to fly. Oh, yeah, you're a fairy. I forgot. That's right. You're going to fly there.
Yeah.
What's your fairy name?
I'll have to workshop it a little bit.
Okay.
Wispy Pal. I don't know.
Me and Wispy Pal are flying off to Namco Museum Volume 2. All right, we're here. It's the Namco Museum, Volume 2. I already forgot your name. Wispy Fairy? What's your name?
Wispy Pal.
Wispy Pal.
Subject to change, but I think that's what we're going with.
Okay, working title. Okay, I'll ring the front desk, and you can tell us the lineup for Namco Museum, Volume 2.
We got Super Pac-Man in 1982, as well as Xevious. The next year, in 1983, we have Mappy. And then the next year, 1984, we've got Gaplus and Grobda, as well as Dragon Buster. There's an interesting curiosity with Volume 2, because in Japan, they didn't get Super Pac-Man on their Volume 2. They have a QDQ. Also in the Japanese version, they have Bombi, and both those games are from 1979. Interestingly, Dragon Buster was only distributed in arcades in Japan and Europe, so Volume 2 is actually its North American debut. Which is actually kind of trippy. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. I don't ever remember seeing a cabinet. I only have ever played it on compilations like this, so I was just kind of like, okay, sure, I guess. I didn't really remember it, so.
You think it would be the kind of game that would have made it here, though? Like, why not? It's, like, weird, right?
Well, yeah, you would have thought Galaga would have made it here. You would have thought, like, people would have, like, gone nuts for those kind of, like, secrets and stuff here. Maybe that was more of a Japanese thing back then, but.
Yeah, like, they were making the calls, I guess.
All right, okay, let me tell the people about the CG intro for Namco Museum Volume 2. Give me that good music. Pac-Man is sitting in his Xevious spaceship playing Super Pac-Man for some reason, when all of a sudden his ship launches by itself and it heads towards the Xevious world. But oh no, it's on autopilot and he's crashing through all the trees. So his ship heads back towards space, and for some reason, the titular dragon from Dragon Buster is waiting there for him. Who knew dragons can breathe in space? I didn't. The dragon breathes fire, and the alien bugs from Gaplus start coming out of his mouth as well for some reason.
What?
Oh no! But hey, don't worry, Mappy is here in the Gaplus ship, and he zaps all the bugs. Mappy's ship then gets upgraded with the tractor beam attachment, which soon attaches itself to a Namco Museum, and the tractor beam beams all the stuff inside. Pac-Man, the Dragon Buster Dragon, the Andor fucking Genesis, all the bugs, everything gets sucked into the big Namco Museum in space!
What? This sounds crazy! Oh, why is Mappy able to pilot a ship? What?
By the way, can we call it the Andor fucking Genesis from now on? I feel like
I don't see why not. Isn't there a Ridge Racer car named the Andor Genesis in like 6 maybe? It's like,
I'm sorry, that's not the right name anymore. We just established.
Oh, the Andor fucking Genesis in Ridge Racer 6. That would be so weird.
Right? Why is this Ridge Racer game rated mature? I have no idea.
Man,
yes, you're.
Mommy, this car says fucking on the side.
Mommy, it says fucking.
What does this word mean?
You are correct. There is a Andor Genesis. There's a Solvaloo car. I used to use it all the time for sure.
Oh my god! Of course it was.
Anyway, we'll talk more about Xevious in a bit. The loading animation is changed from Pac-Man in the first one to a hopping Mappy. Hopping Mappy was a was that only for NES/Famicom, or was there like a hopping Mappy arcade game?
I feel like there was an arcade version. Okay, but regardless, it's kind of a deep cut so far as Mappy goes, because people know the original game, but they don't really know of hopping too much. It's like a really obscure, what do you want to call it? I don't even know if you want to call it a sequel. It's like a spin-off?
No,
I don't even know.
They've never actually tried to sequelize Mappy. It's a totally different thing. Oh, by the way, the Famicom game I was thinking was Mappy Land.
Mappy Land, yeah,
not hopping Mappy.
Yeah, that's right.
But God, we're fucking dorks. So in this museum, it's the same layout as Volume 1. It's the same octagonal thing, the marble floors, the pillars, and the various things just lead to L-shaped or slightly S-shaped corridors where you could look at all the materials for that, which leads right to a game room. Same layout as Volume 1, which is, I don't know if I want to say it's disappointing, but it's also the same music too, which is, I don't know. It's just the exact same thing, so there's not really much to talk about as far as museum layout goes here.
Yeah, but I think contextually it makes sense, though, if they're releasing these games with this cadence. Because, I mean, video games having asset reuse? Oh my god, sound the alarm, right? So
Don't tell the gamers nowadays.
Oh god! Oh my god! This got a 50 on Metacritic because the hallways look the same! Oh, it's dumb.
Imagine these assholes nowadays playing like Mega Man NES games or something. They're like, oh, it's the same sprite or something like that.
You don't fucking say.
Anyway, there's not much to talk about as far as layout goes because it's exactly the same as Volume 1. So we can just get right into the game rooms if you don't mind.
Yeah.
My favorite one of all of these, I don't know about you, was definitely the Xevious room because it's the interior of an alien ship with like these 4 small energy ball pillar things and like a giant energy ball in the middle. And it's clearly far too much for the PS1 to handle, since this game slows to an absolute crawl while you're in there. Namco Museum 2 and Volume 1, for that matter, run at 60 frames a second, and it doesn't skip frames, meaning it employs the old technique of slowdown when things get too much. It doesn't just cut the frame rate. It just slows to a crawl, and that's what happens in the Xevious room, man. You are moving slow.
Yeah.
Like,
you really do.
it's a lot. I thought the exit being like a Star Trek beam device thing was kind of a nice touch. I like that.
Yeah, it leads into the motif. Like, those sort of beams aren't actually in Xevious or whatever, but the fact that like they kind of kept that sci-fi theme running, I thought that was really cool. And but yeah, if you just look at the space, it very much looks like a slowdown causing room, because like all the walls are textured and like there's like hovering objects. It's like quite involved, like relative to most other things in Volume 2. So yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we see the slowdown, but like at the same time, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, you would, man. To put that kind of strain on RAM with the textures is something that's like unheard of today. But like back then, you really couldn't do 60 frames a second unless you were. I mean, think about that Pac-Man room we were talking about from Volume 1. There's hardly any textures in there, right? It's like kind of a box, but like the floor or like the house, the Pac-Man house, none of that is textures. It's all just like flat
there might
colors.
Be a fence. Yeah, I think there's a fence, maybe. That's might be about it. But most of it just
there's
like
a fence, like,
colors.
but that's part of like the background box, right? It's kind of just like a bitmap, I think. So it's like,
I think so. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, which is fine, especially for 1986. But man, as soon as you pour on the textures, like the Xevious room did, oh boy! But it's still cool. It doesn't matter that it runs like quicksand. It's the coolest room to me, by the way. But talk about a room you like.
Mappy's was not something I ever would have expected. So it almost looks like an old-time saloon, which isn't really the same motif you see in the game itself. But you see, I think it's Boss Goro, like the big cat, and the little cats, you see them on the upstairs floor, but they're actually just flat-scrolling boards, which brings to mind like Hogan's Alley or something like that. But there's even like, yeah, they really do. There's a decorative staircase that leads to the second floor, but you can't actually go upstairs. But sort of up top, there's a framed art portrait of Goro, and it's like, okay, I guess you got your mob boss painting. I guess.
Is this supposed to be his house or something? I guess, or like
maybe it's possible. I mean, yeah, I didn't actually necessarily think of it that way. That makes a lot more sense. But to add more to the whole thing, there's even random like images on the walls of other Namco franchises. Pac-Man's got a PlayStation controller in his hand, and there's even like a Gaplus themed tractor beam picture. I don't know exactly what the heck it's doing here, but the freakiest thing of all is the exit gate, though. So like if you turn around, the doorway is framed by this giant mouth of Goro. So he's like, if you walk through, he's kind of like gobbling you up. It looks like it belongs more like a house of horrors or something. It's like so freaky.
Yeah, it's like enter the big clown mouth to go into the the circus tent or something. Yeah, it's weird.
It's like, but then why is that the exit? That's like, it's so weird, man. I don't understand it.
It's very strange. Well,
yeah.
I have an answer to one of your questions that you're not going to like.
Okay.
So the reason why Pac-Man has the PlayStation controller and the Gaplus tractor beam is because those are images from the CG intro. When Pac-Man is playing Super Pac-Man inside of the ship, and Mappy does the tractor beam. Those are just images from the intro.
I mean, so you're gonna tell me that like Mr. Bossman Goro here is so rich, he's gonna spend it on abstract art that makes like no sense.
Oh man, yes. I mean, yes. Basically, I mean,
that's what we would do with our money, right? It's like, yeah.
I mean, look, if you have the chance to buy Pac-Man with a PlayStation controller playing his own video game in a spaceship, you got to do it. Okay, you have to.
That's a lot of layers. My brain's going to be bent if I think about it. But
well, I gotta talk about one other room, and it might be my favorite room in the entire series. Okay, maybe. So
that's bold.
It is bold, but it very well may be true. The Super Pac-Man room is crazy. So it's this like swanky underground club, right? So you walk in and you're greeted with this very underground jazz version of the Pac-Man theme. Cool, perfect, right? 90s as hell. CD-ROM is shit, right?
It is.
Straight ahead, Blinky is sitting at this table with like this shit-eating grin on his face. He is so happy. You saw this, right? Like this is like he's sitting at the Super Pac-Man cocktail cabinet, you know, with this grin. So as I turn to the right because there's like some Pac-Man graffiti on the brick wall back there, because of course brick wall, it's a Swinky Underground club, it's got to be brick, right?
Yeah.
Pinky is standing there clearly drunk, according to like the eyeball texture it has on, and to the left, Inky is also very much drunk. Wow, I cannot believe they made the ghost drunk. Like,
I think they're blushing, right? They have like little like red under their. They look kind of like out of it, right?
Well, yeah, it's like when you drink too much and your face gets flushed or hot, right? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, that kind of thing.
It's so weird.
Clyde the ghost is the bartender, and they gave him like a fancy bow tie and mustache and everything, which is
Sure.
I mean, wow. But here's the best part. That's all cool, right? Here's the cool part. All the way in the back is a stage, and there's a bunch of ghosts standing around waiting for like a show. And if you wait long enough, you will get a show. Pac-Man gets chased by a ghost all the way off to the left side of the screen, and like all the ghosts cheer, yay! But then the ghost gets chased back to the opposite way by Super Pac-Man, and all the ghosts turn blue and shake. Ooh, so scary, right? It's fan-fucking-tastic that they did this. And like we said at the top, Super Pac-Man is only an R version of the game. So they made this room just for us. They didn't have to do this. They could have just appropriated the QDQ room and did some other bullshit. They didn't do that. They made this all for us. And that is so... The effort that they did for this is just... I admire it so much.
I really think it's super cool. I guess as a pun, no pun intended, but it's interesting just because the Westerners know all about Pac-Man, so you don't necessarily even have to have experienced Super Pac-Man to appreciate this. Just like it really stands out. Of course, we'll be left wondering is exactly why they're drunk, but I mean, aside from that,
I can't believe
it's just
it.
so cool. It's just man,
It's so wild that they made the ghost drunk. That is just so... That's ridiculous.
I mean, they're having a good time. You can't fault them for that, right? But at the same time,
Absolutely not.
One more room I'd like to quickly go over is the Gaplus room, which is interestingly minimalist. When you enter, you're sort of the heart of the spinning tractor beam, and I'm like, wait, what? It looks very vector game like in a manner of speaking. And but when you're in the middle of this beam, it almost looks like you're inside of like a abstract art installation. It's like I don't know what I'm doing here, but it's
cool though. It's cool.
It is cool.
I like it. It is weird though, right when you walk in, because you're facing directly down the barrel of it. So it's like, whoa, okay, this is weird. If I stand here, I feel like I'm gonna get like, you know how like the penguin and Batman would twirl his umbrella to like hypnotize you because it makes like a swirly pattern. That's what it's
a reference. Yeah, it's like
that's
that.
That's what I think of when I see that.
Oh my god, that's great.
As far as stuff in the museum goes, outside of the game rooms, I really enjoyed looking through the Xevious visual file. You can find this in the lounge, and it included all the original drawings of all the enemy ship designs and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's great to look at because there's something about the art of Xevious that I've always found super appealing. You know, like everything has this like unsettlingly like angular and alien look to it.
Yeah.
You know, like some sort of weird and bad future. I always really like the look of Xevious, which is probably why it translated so well to like early 3D with like Xevious 3D also on PS1. I think that's why it works so well, you know, because it's already that kind of angular shit.
Yeah, I think that they're timeless mechanical designs, and they really sell that sort of unsettling vibe. Because I mean, they're just very familiar shapes, but almost sort of like really bold in a way. It's like, yeah, it's familiar and alien at the same time. That's like the fascinating part about them.
Mm-hmm. It's super cool. Yeah, it's not like one of those planets where it's like these big growing vines coming out of trees and shit that you don't see on Earth. You know what I mean? Like it's familiar, but like very mechanized maybe is actually a word. Yeah. But the coolest thing in this Xevious visual file was the original illustration of the map in the game, like clearly done with like colored pencil or something.
Yeah,
but the in-game graphics map right next to it side by side was like a very fascinating like look. You don't usually get to see production materials from that old even today, you know? So to see it in Namco Museum Volume 2, I thought was... Did you get to see stuff like that in a game before Namco Museum? I genuinely don't think games did stuff like this.
I can't recall an instance whatsoever. And even honestly, since then, we barely see like concept work like that at all, because I mean, these colored pencil like drawings in themselves are kind of like tentative and like a little rough, but obviously they're good for planning purposes. But so far as creative endeavors go, like people don't always show like the sort of steps because they could be a little rough, right? Maybe even a little embarrassing at times, so people don't always show the process. And the fact that we actually got to see like the one-to-one like aspect of this, that's actually really impressive.
Yeah, it's just so nice. I just appreciate it so much. Even though, you know, these are PS1 games, the resolution is only so much. You can only zoom in so far and it gets hella pixelated. But like, honestly, for the time, there wasn't any precedent for this kind of material. So it was just great. And it's still cool to see today. Yeah, it's pixelated as hell, but it's still nice. You know?
Yeah, it's definitely pretty charming, and something that is potentially also charming is the Dragon Buster art also in the lounge. There are a lot of concept art pieces for the monsters. As much as sort of we have ambivalent feelings about the game itself, I actually really enjoy this art. There's almost like an old-timey sort of like scientific book illustration quality to like the way these things are rendered. However, there's like this giant mouth and they call it a cave shark. I don't know exactly why that's a cave shark. It's just a giant mouth with teeth, but it's pretty freaky. But I was actually super into like these depictions of dragons, and looked way more enthralling than the dragons in the game itself. So I mean,
yeah, the dragon in the game itself is like fairly like standard like European-ass like green dragon, but yeah, the cave shark though, that was kind of freaky. It's kind of like, is this an alligator? Is this like a fucking I don't even know,
man. I don't know. It was weird.
Too bad the game doesn't look anything like this, huh? It's
not even close, dude. It's not even remotely close.
Just not good in my opinion. But as far as Pac-Man goes, I really like the pre-rendered background of like real life fruits. Whenever you look at like a Pac-Man item, I don't know why it made me laugh. Like Pac-Man, I guess you have to have fruit, even though Super Pac-Man does. Well, I guess it does have fruit in a manner of speaking once you get past all the keys, dog. But
yeah, you intermittently get to have some every so often. But I thought that pre-rendered quality almost seemed ripped out of like a 90s screensaver or something like that.
I mentioned these earlier, but a pop card, and I didn't know this before Namco Museum, is something they would put on new machines to show that they're new. Hey, here's a new game. When you go into the arcade, it'd have a little standee. A good comp for us is maybe like, if anyone remembers at GameStop, sometimes they have little standees up front at the front desk.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
You know what I mean? Sure. Like where it's like, here's a little tiny standee of like a Halo 3 and like some Halo 3 breath mints or like some whatever the fuck the thing is. Like those kind of sized like are called pop cards. So like I didn't know those. Did you know those were a thing in Japan? I had no clue.
No, I didn't know. Yeah.
Anyway, they show the pop card for Super Pac-Man. Excuse my Japanese, but it says Gekiretsu Henshin. which means something like Gekiretsu means like intense or violent, not like violent like you're hurting somebody, but like violently happening, like intensely. Transformation, henshin. I think a lot of people know that word. So
Yeah,
like I guess that's what Super Pac-Man does.
It's intense, all right. Oh my god, it's super intense. Yes, I mean, look at him, right? It's just like grows like double his size.
It's intense. But yeah. Oh, one more thing before we move on to talking about the games more. In the history of Grobda, you can see the history of when you go to like how to play the same way I read the Pac-Man thing from Volume 1. I found it in history after the how to play. So the history of Grobda says Grobda was a tank shooter released in 1984. It was decided that Grobda, one of the characters that appeared in Xevious, should have its own game.
That's so weird. Like that sentence, like why?
Namco loves themselves. We said this earlier. They're the most fucking fan servicey, like self-referential company like ever. Like,
yeah, it could potentially be borderline narcissistic. I mean, I guess it's just in good fun, but like at the same time, it's just like who actually figured like, oh, let's pick this tank, let's make a game about land combat and contrast it with like flying. It's like what? How do you get there? It's so weird.
let's talk about these games as a whole first, because then this is some sicko shit right here. Can we agree there at first before I go on? Like,
yeah, of course.
Come on. These games in Volume 2 do not give a fuck about you. Like, Gaplus, Grobda, and Dragon Buster are for true sickos only. Like, I dare anyone to figure out how to play Super Pac-Man without, like, several retries, because it took us many times to, like, oh, this is how you play the game? Like,
I don't know how long it took. It was a very long time. I mean, now we do, but...
I mean, when the quote-unquote easiest game you have in your lineup is Mappy, you know you're in for some shit. Like, yeah. Xevious has some general appeal too, don't get me wrong, but come on, this is like a fans-only volume, right? Like,
I agree, and like it's not, Mappy's not a pushover either. You can like totally game over in any of these games lickety split. You actually played some Grobda and mentioned how tough it was, and I was like, wait, is that really the case? So I fired it up. I game over lickety split. I was like, oh,
does not give a shit, man. Grobda doesn't
but
give Go ahead.
The big question is just like, what in the world would have compelled them to do this right after Volume 1? Because, I mean, Volume 1 is relatively sane and has a pretty, quote-unquote, like, standard lineup, except for some of the oddballs. But, like, what went through their mind when they decided to pick these?
I don't know, man. Like, they could have... I mean, that first volume could have been, like, Pac-Man... Bosconian, Toy Pop, maybe like pole position, right? They could have saved Galaga for this one if they were worried about having mainstream appeal for each volume, but apparently they weren't worried about that at all, right? Because...
I guess Mappy sort of fits the bill, but it can't... I guess.
But maybe because Gaplus was already here, they didn't feel like having two of those kind of shooters at the same time. So, like, Gaplus, we have both historically sucked ass at this game.
Oh my god.
Like I just said, it's like the next in that lineage of like Namco space shooters. So like Galaxian was 1979, Galaga's 81, Gaplus is 84, and it's the same kind of like, what do you call that, by the way? It's not I don't feel comfortable calling it a shmup.
Like, I've heard the term of a fixed screen shooter being kicked around. I'm not really sure if that's like a proper way to phrase it, but I mean, on paper, I guess, but
it feels better than shmup though.
Right. Because I think the shmup part implies you're like scrolling, but
yeah. But yeah, Gaplus is just sicko mode Galaga, man. It's just it really is.
It's great. It's so tough. Oh my gosh. I've often joked that like an alien just kind of gets in my back line and just kind of like rams me in the ass. I'm like, okay, thanks.
It flies directly up your ass. Yeah, it's like
it really does. Oh, it's so funny.
I do want to talk about Grobda some more, if you don't mind, because I really do appreciate that game now, probably more than I ever have. I never disliked it or anything, but like you said, it's a very tough game. I've never played a game where you can game over that fast in record time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a shield button and a fire button, and it's a tank game, a screen, if you will, as we just said, tank game, where you have to kill all the tanks on the screen and then go to the next game. I'm sure you've seen games like this before out there, but this one just moves super fast. It's like they're all shooting at you and they're all attacking at once. Okay, challenge 1, boop. Okay, you kill them all in 3 seconds. Challenge 2, boom. And it just keeps going. It's a very like rapid pace game.
Absolutely,
and you're not prepared for it. So if you don't know how to use that shield button, you will die. Like you can game over in like 15 seconds. No joke. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened to me recently because I forgot to use the shield. But once you do, it actually makes a lot of sense, though.
Right, but the learning curve on that is maybe a little bit. I mean, I don't know how this game did originally when it came out, but like, ooh, that's a tough one. But you know, I do like this. As you're a fan of Namco's tank game lineage, I guess we could say.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big Battle City fan. Said nobody ever, but but personally, I really feel like Grobda's more universal appeal just because of the pace, right? Because I mean, like Battle City and to some degree Tank Force, those are a little plotting in some ways. Like it takes a little while to get rolling, but the snappiness and the rapid nature of Grobda, I think those make it more appealing. I think in a way. And certainly more punishing at the same time, though. But I think it's fun.
Yeah, and once you do, and look, I like the ideas of it, meter management, and like all of it appeals to me, you know. So it's cool, but just man, on paper, Super Pac-Man, Xevious, Mappy, Gaplus, Grobda, Dragon Buster. Ooh, that sicko's row right there, huh?
Yeah, especially Dragon Buster. I can't play that one, man.
You got anything nice to say about Dragon Buster before we move on?
I mean, the biggest takeaway is it led to a cool gallery in Volume 2.
That's pretty kind of rude, but I'm here for it, I guess.
That's a great gallery, though. Don't get me wrong.
That's a great gallery, all right. Before we move on, just a couple more notes that I wanted to bring up. You may remember that at the beginning of the intro, I said that Pac-Man was playing Super Pac-Man in the Xevious ship. You may also remember that I said Super Pac-Man was replaced by QDQ in the Japanese lineup of Namco Museum Volume 2. So that begs the question, what game was Pac-Man playing in the Japanese intro? The answer is QDQ. He was just playing the game that was swapped out for ours.
You know, it's so weird they actually had such attention to detail that they made 2 different intros, basically, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a little thing to replace in the CGI timeline for sure, but they didn't have to do that. He could have just been playing any old random game that we didn't know, right? So
they got to shoehorn everything in, though. That's the shtick.
Of course. And that would be their only way to shoehorn in Super Pac-Man into the intro for us.
You mean there wasn't a giant guy chasing keys in the background?
Oh, God. I mean, I don't think they're going to blow more CG budget for that.
No, it takes budget. Okay, that's a concern. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, Namco was doing a lot of CG, but I'm sure they weren't just going to be like, oh, we're going to spend money just for the Americans. I don't think so. We're going to...
I'll figure a way to teleport us back some decades in 3D model with the knowledge I definitely would have had at the
time. Yep. So Next Generation, the magazine from back in the day, Rest in Piss, reviewed this game, Namco Museum Volume 2, and they rated it 2 stars out of 5 and stated that, quote, only the most diehard classic game collectors will want this disc, and they'll only want half of it. Namco should more closely consider the future lineup in its classic series.
Oh, no.
So look, I hated this magazine, if you can't tell from me, 10 seconds of me talking about it. And I'll talk more shit about them later. But I'm going to be real. They were correct to say this about Volume 2. I get that Namco planned all of these out ahead of time, but they really loaded up Volume 1 with mainstream appeal, and the sales of Volume 1 bore that out, obviously. Again, 1.6 million sold. I don't know how Volume 2 sold, but it couldn't have been nearly as much. I mean...
I can't imagine, but can you imagine the guys at Next Generation chasing some Dragon Buster? That's the part of the half that people want, right? Dragon Buster.
Well, see,
and Gaplus.
That's the thing. What when they say they want half of it? Which 3 games are they? Super Pac-Man, Gaplus.
I mean, presumably Xevious, but
then what's number 3? It can't be Dragon Buster. It can't be.
I think it's safe to assume Mappy, maybe, but it's just what?
I guess, man. Jesus.
This ambiguity is what happens when you just say shit like that, right?
Which is why I didn't. They fucking. You know what these assholes did one time before we move on to Volume 3? They downgraded, almost said downvoted, like it's fucking Reddit. They downgraded Pilotwing 64 because it's not an action game. They said something like there's no significant action, which makes it dull, or some line like that. I'm like, bro,
what?
It's literally a pilot test game. It's not supposed to be like exciting in that kind of way. I mean, it's not an action game.
But also, like, wouldn't they have had the precedent of Pilot Wings, because that also has pilot tests in it, so it's not new.
I don't think they were surprised at what the game was. I think see, that's what makes it stupid, right? They fully expected the game that they got, and they still said, well, it's not this. Okay, well, I don't know what you want Pilot Wings to be, dog. Like, whatever, man.
I don't think they know. They don't know either. One really quick thing before we move on to Volume 3, though. Each of these games has a really detailed record section, more detailed than record sections I've even seen in successive compilations, and there's a lot of granular stats, right? So they'll even say how much of each item you've collected in Mappy, like the TVs and stuff like that, and it's like they didn't have to do that. And I can't say I've played literally every Namco Museum release, but I don't remember others counting stuff like that. It's just you got so and so number of radios, you've blown up so and so number of enemies, and it's super detailed. It was not necessary, but it's cool.
Yeah, there's I remember in Volume 1, there's I used to looking at my stats for Pac-Man in particular, how many times you got a power pellet and you ate 2 ghosts or 3 ghosts or all 4 ghosts, or how many, how many times you ate each ghost. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. It's crazy with the stats in there. Games don't do that today.
It's pretty rare.
We always call them the Smash Brothers stats, right? Because Sakurai likes to get granular with that kind of stuff. I mean, he even did that shit in Meteos or whatever. He loves to give you stats like that. But
oh yeah, absolutely.
But man, it's just we keep saying, the attention and care, and that's kind of why we wanted to do these. It's just you don't see stuff like this today in compilation, so we just thought it was fascinating to take a look back. This is what they took from us, or something like that.
Give us our stats back.
Give us hashtag, bitches. All right, ready to move on to Volume 3.
I am.
Let's do it. Flap those fairy wings.
Yeah, I'm moving the ship I'm moving like a Solvaloo.
I'm moving like an Andor fucking Genesis into space. Let's go. Sorry, everybody. As you can tell from the runtime of this podcast, we are about to end. This is going to be in 3 parts. So this is just part 1 of Namco Museum, the PlayStation era. We'll see you next time in part 2 in a couple of weeks. See you next time. Bye.
We'll see you next time on